He was a planner, a genius, a leader, charismatic, and the biggest truth is that he never wanted to become what he became. A young painter who wanted to touch the world with his art, but fate forced him to take up a gun. Then an entire era burned and turned to ashes in the fire of his revenge. This may seem like an exaggeration, but the truth is, today's world still breathes under the shadow of his fear. From the atomic bomb to aerial waves, everything echoes his fear. Today, you are watching our YouTube channel Unlocked History Hub's documentary, Who Was He?, where we bring the story of history's most curious character, Adolf Hitler, before you. September 28, 1918. The First World War is taking its last breaths. Only 188 kilometers from Paris, in the small town of Marcoing, a young German soldier, who is only a courier, is at the most important moment of his life. A British soldier, T. Henry, is in his sights. But suddenly, Henry lowers his rifle and lets him go. This moment seems ordinary, but in reality, Henry changed history. Because the young man who was let go was Adolf Hitler himself, whose actions in the next war would take millions of lives. In a chemical attack during the First World War, Hitler's eyes were severely affected, and he temporarily went blind. After treatment, the light returned. But now there was a fire of revenge burning in those eyes. Hitler wanted to become a painter in his childhood, but after the war, he abandoned this dream. He decided to take revenge for the defeat, even if the whole world had to oppose him. Hitler began his political life with a small, unknown party, the German Workers' Party, which later became the Nazi Party. The defeat in the First World War and the imposed humiliation made this party popular among the people. Germany was imposed war reparations equal to 96,000 tons of gold, an unbearable burden. Hitler worked in the party as the propaganda chief, but in 1921, when the party was on the brink of decline, he accepted the leadership. He personally chose the party's symbol, the swastika, which originally symbolized good luck and prosperity, but Hitler turned it into a symbol of terror for the world. The rise of the Nazi Party's power occurred when former First World War hero General Erich Ludendorff also joined the party. In 1921, Hitler established the SA, the Attack Division, whose members were called brown shirts or stormtroopers, who took an oath to give their lives for Hitler. In 1923, the industrial city of Ruhr in Germany was occupied by France and Belgium. The German government ordered workers to stop working. But due to the lack of money in the treasury, the currency devalued to just 2 pennies, and a double loaf of bread cost 2 billion marks. This was the Germany that made Hitler a defeated nation, a fire of revenge, and a young soldier who once wanted to be a painter. The German currency crisis was so severe that people carried sacks full of notes, and those who had saved 100,000 or 200,000 marks with a lifetime of effort lost all their savings in just a few days. The billions of currency notes lying in banks became completely useless, and those who were once billionaires became like ordinary people in a matter of days. The currency became so worthless that people started burning notes to light fires to save gas and wood in winters. This was the Germany that had created all the conditions to give birth to a revolution and a revolutionary leader. A void had emerged that the German people believed someone would take them out of this darkness. Such voids are usually filled by 2 types of people, either a clever statesman or an emotional, charismatic revolutionary. Germany's fate was such that this void was filled at that time by Adolf Hitler. Whether he was a statesman or an emotional revolutionary, you decide for yourself. By that time, Hitler had fully armed his organization. The SA was no longer just a political party, but had become a revolutionary force. Only in Munich, it had 3,000 trained soldiers. Inspired by Mussolini, Hitler chose Munich's beer hall to announce the revolution. On November 8, 1923, Hitler entered the beer hall waving a pistol and announced the establishment of Nazi rule over the city. The next day, he marched toward the city center with thousands of armed workers. Hitler expected popularity in government like Mussolini, but this dream was soon shattered. The police started firing at Nazi workers, and in response, the Nazi workers also fired. In just a few moments, 14 Nazis and 4 police officers were killed, and thus the first attempt at revolution failed. Most of Hitler's companions were arrested, and he himself managed to escape, but 2 days later, the German police put him in jail. In this rebellion, First World War hero Erich Ludendorff was also arrested, but due to his connections and fame, he got away. Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but 9 months later, he was released through the pressure and cunning of the Nazi Party. It was in jail that Hitler wrote his famous book Mein Kampf, in which he declared the German Aryan race, the supreme race, claimed that the world's problems needed to be solved by Germans, and blamed the Jews for Germany's decline. After jail, Hitler had learned the lesson that revolution in Germany was easier to bring by vote than by bullet. He began preparing the party for the electoral field. Fortunately, during this time, Rouen had also been freed from France and Belgium, and American loans temporarily revived Germany's economy. Now Hitler needed a propaganda master for the party, and his choice was Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels had twisted feet and walked with a limp, but he was an unmatched expert in propaganda. He spread Hitler's ideas to every corner of Germany. The wealthy and middle classes, fearful of the power of the communist factions and their trade unions, gave Hitler financial support. Even American industrialist Henry Ford financially assisted Hitler. Hitler presented himself to the public as simple, pious, and a vegetarian, although secretly he continued to use opium. Despite the public image, Goebbels' propaganda, and the funding from the wealthy, in the 1928 elections, the Nazi Party won only 12 seats. This was a blow for Hitler. But then the American stock market crash of 1929 occurred, and the Great Depression engulfed the whole world. German industries shut down, 6.1 million people became unemployed, and Hitler presented himself as the messiah of the people. In the 1930 elections, he got 18% of the vote, and in the 1932 presidential elections, he got 36% of the vote. But the elderly President Hindenburg did not let him win. Despite the president's hesitation, the situation worsened, and eventually, Hindenburg allowed Hitler to become Germany's chancellor. Thus, in 1933, Hitler became Germany's chancellor, and Franz von Papen became vice-chancellor. But what happened after that was a turning point in history that changed the destiny of the entire world. On January 30, 1933, Hitler became Germany's chancellor, and Papen became vice-chancellor. But just 1 month before this, a 52-year-old Jewish scientist had secretly fled the country. This was the same person who was later offered to become the president of Israel, but he declined politely. This was Albert Einstein, the greatest mind of the 20th century, who was well aware of the dangers of Hitler's arrival. 4 weeks after becoming chancellor, Hitler announced new parliamentary elections to increase his seats. Preparations for the elections were underway when on February 27, 1933, the German parliament building caught fire. The fire was started by a communist, but Hitler saw this event as a golden opportunity and ran propaganda against the communists, which increased the Nazi Party's voters. On March 5, 1933, the elections were held, and the Nazi Party won 288 out of 647 seats. Just 18 days later, on March 23, Hitler obtained dictatorial powers from the parliament. After that, one thing after another happened. Opposition political parties were banned, trade unions were eliminated, press was controlled, and books that were not according to Nazi ideology were burned. But there was still one obstacle in Hitler's path: Ernst Röhm, the powerful commander of the SS. The German army considered Röhm a threat, because they believed he wanted to take control over the army and the country. Hitler decided that if he wanted the army's trust, he had to remove Röhm. On the night of June 30, 1934, Hitler's personal guards, the SS, killed Röhm and 400 other people. This night is remembered as the Night of the Long Knives. After this massacre, the relations between the army and Hitler became strong. Papen was also sent home, and everyone understood that Hitler was politically uncontrollable. After Hindenburg's death in 1934, Hitler also assumed the office of president, and by combining the positions of chancellor and president, he declared himself Führer, meaning leader. Now there was no need for parliament, no elections, and no other political party. The Führer was now all in all. All courts, police, and government institutions came under the control of the Nazi Party. Judges had to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler. Hitler had no personal income, but through the party fund and government income, he strengthened himself and the people. His book Mein Kampf was made mandatory for government institutions and schools, and by 1939, 5 million copies had been sold. In the early years of the government, Hitler not only built his own wealth, but also started programs for the people: schools, hospitals, subsidies, and employment. Except for Jews, no one in Germany remained unemployed, and this was the real trick that made people follow Hitler. After consolidating power, Hitler turned his attention to the foreign front. He stopped repayment of foreign debts, withdrew from the League of Nations, and terminated international treaties. Then Hitler began actions against the Jews. Restrictions on marriage, voting, employment, hate education in the curriculum, and banning Jewish athletes from participating in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Germany appeared peaceful and developed to the public, but the reality was that the foundations of hatred and violence against a generation were being laid. Hitler killed 6 million Jews, which was later called the Holocaust. Famous psychologist Sigmund Freud was also among the victims and was exiled. Interestingly, Hitler's ancestry traces back to African Berber Jews, and his beloved Eva Braun was also Jewish by ancestry. Yet Hitler considered himself purely German and continued actions against Jews. Then one day, Hitler attacked France, and thus the peace of the world was turned upside down. Germany was demonstrating its power, but Britain's air defense stopped Hitler's plans. His eyes were focused on Soviet Russia. Interestingly, Hitler hated Russia more than the Jews. There was a centuries-old enmity with the Slavic people of Russia, and he wanted to establish a great German empire over the vast territory of Soviet Russia. Attacking Soviet Russia was not easy. Hitler's own generals warned him that it would be dangerous. Napoleon's example was before them, who was defeated in Russia's harsh winter. But Hitler's eyes were full of determination. He ignored the generals' warnings and began planning the expansion of war, while the world's political leaders were inviting him to peace. Allama Iqbal had predicted the Second World War before his death, and Mahatma Gandhi wrote a letter to Hitler urging him to abandon the path of war, otherwise someone would defeat him with his own weapons. Hitler ignored all the advice. Preparation for the attack on Soviet Russia was carried out in extreme secrecy. Not even Stalin received a whisper of news, and even Britain warned Stalin, but he could not hear. Hitler's hatred for Russia became evident when he declared before his generals that Moscow would be wiped off the earth and turned into a lake to generate electricity, and Russian culture would be erased from existence. The summer of 1941 was the best time. But Hitler delayed the invasion of Russia by 4 weeks by attacking Greece and Yugoslavia. These 4 weeks later proved costly to him. Finally, on the morning of June 22, 1941, almost 4 million German soldiers attacked Soviet Russia, which was named Operation Barbarossa. When the bombing started, a Russian army officer called his general and said, "Sir, the Germans have attacked." The general replied, "Have you gone mad?" But this was not madness, it was reality. When Stalin learned of the attack, he remained in a state of madness for 2 weeks, unable to speak or hear. Finally, on July 4, 1941, Stalin addressed the Russians on the radio. But before the German army reached Moscow, it was diverted towards Ukraine. Upon reaching near Moscow, the Russians gathered more troops and defeated the Germans. In the same year, Hitler made another deadly decision. He opened a front against America. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, in 1942, Hitler attacked Stalingrad to psychologically defeat the city. But Russia's harsh winter broke the back of the German army. This was the turning point of Hitler's life. The German army was either killed or captured, and the Russian army began moving towards Berlin. In the West as well, American and British forces attacked Normandy on June 6, 1944, defeating the Germans. From the east, Russia. From the west, the American alliance. Hitler's encirclement tightened, but the German people were still with Hitler. On April 20, 1944, Hitler's birthday came, and despite fear and defeat, the German people celebrated it grandly. Finally, Hitler's world was limited to the Führer bunker. His last days there passed in despair, fear, and chaos. Drugs ran out, the high ended. His body began to decay from inside, and his hands and feet started trembling. On April 30th, 1945, the Russian army reached very close to the bunker. Hitler realized that the end was near. After the death of his friend Mussli on April 28th, Hitler married Eva Braun only for 24 hours. The next day, April 30th, Hitler, wearing the Iron Cross from the First World War, went to the study room with his bride and committed suicide. Hitler's last gift for Eva Braun was a small but deadly cyanide capsule. As soon as the guard heard the echo of the gunshot, he ran into the bunker. The scene was so terrifying and historical that the pages of history will always remember it. Hitler had shot himself in the head, and Eva Braun had also ended her life by taking poison. Interestingly, Hitler's birth, marriage, and death all occurred in April. This was the bunker where the world's most dangerous leader took his last breaths. Bombing had caused severe damage to it, but even today, this historic site attracts tourists. After Hitler, his propaganda master Joseph Goebbels also took his and his wife's life, and first gave poison to his 6 innocent children before embracing death. Thus, the sins of the parents were suffered by the innocent children. The Nazis claimed that Hitler's empire would last 1,000 years. But the reality is that this empire reached its end in just 12 years. The guard who saw Hitler's body, Rahus Misht, said that Hitler was not entirely cruel. Before his death, he made the army take an oath of loyalty and instructed the guards to burn his body so that it would not be desecrated like Mussolini. The guards threw both bodies into the fire, but the Russian army arrived, extinguished the fire, and took the remains into their possession. Interestingly, Hitler's body was identified through his dental records. Only 5 teeth were real, the rest were fake. In 1970, the Soviet secret agency threw the remains into a river in Germany. There are photographic claims that this is a picture of Hitler's body, but it was never confirmed. Hitler died, but the Second World War changed the map of the world. Pakistan, India, and many other countries became independent, and today the world has turned into a global village. The world learned a lesson from Hitler's extremism and ideology of racial superiority. My nation is the best, and nations resolve to live together. International organizations were established to prevent war. Restrictions were imposed on nuclear weapons and other arms, and efforts to maintain peace continue even today. Interestingly, in 2016, Germany allowed the republication of Hitler's book Mein Kampf, and it became a bestseller. Now the question is, which leaders in today's world, knowingly or unknowingly, have Hitler-like ideas or are following his path? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. We have prepared this video with great effort and research. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and tell everyone around you about Unlocked History Hub.